Morning, everybody. So happy to be here with you to worship God. Today's scripture, by the way, my name's Celinda. Today's scripture is Hebrews 12, 1-3. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. This is the word of God.
Well, good morning, everyone. Early in my marriage, I've mentioned this before, it's kind of like this rite of passage that I think is relatable to a lot of us. Because the first year of our marriage, Rachel and I didn't have a lot of money, but we had something else called debt from school. And so it was kind of hard making ends meet. Anyone been there? You don't have to raise your hand, but just like internally, like it's almost like this rite of passage when a young couple, they start their journey married together. You don't have a lot of extras. And I remember it was a very difficult time for us, our first year. But the good thing was we were newlyweds, so we didn't even know what we didn't have. We were just happy to be married. It did mean, though, that doing things like paying off our school bills were kind of difficult. I remember that first year, all we could do was pay our interest. That's how little we made. And, when it came to, groceries and normal bills and getting a car for the first time, it was like we could just barely do it. What was really difficult were the extras, things like birthdays or Christmas time. And so we would do little extras to make some money. We would scrounge around. But trying to come up with these things was very difficult. So we had to get really clever about what it meant to get each other some meaningful gifts. Now, here's the extra problem with my wife. My wife doesn't want anything in the world. I come from a family where that is unacceptable, okay? At Christmas time, you are not getting a present. You are getting presents, plural, many presents. It's like you go nuts on those things. So it is unacceptable that my wife, every Christmas, what do you want for Christmas this year, honey? She goes, world peace. That's great. I want to know, what iPad do you want? Tell me something I can buy you. So anytime I can find out something from Rachel, I have to usually hear it halfway through the year. I kind of register something she said, a passing comment, back in my brain. I'm like, okay, there might be something there. And my wife, believe it or not, is quite musical. She never shows it up here, but she loves music. She's self-taught, played violin for years. She plays guitar every single night before she goes to bed. And she also loves the piano. And I remember it was this new thing online called Craigslist. And Craigslist was this place where you would go online and find other people's stuff. Some might call it junk, whatever. And they were trying to get rid of it. And so they would sell it secondhand at a reduced price. And I remember my wife saying she hopes one day to have a piano. Well, I registered that, and then here we come to November. I go on this new website called Craigslist. I'm dating myself a little bit here. And I find not one, but multiple stand-up pianos that people were practically giving away. They were so cheap. I couldn't believe it. I thought I just lucked out, scored out. And so I contacted one of these individuals that was giving away a really quality piano. It was a little older, but it had been kept in good conditions at a great price. Contacted her, and she was like, yes, if we arrange it at this particular time, on this particular date, I'm going to be available to sell you my piano. So I thought this was great. Now, here's a couple problems. Problem number one is I'm living in a city called Indianapolis at the time, a couple million people. I'm on the northern part of the city. She lives on the southern part of the city. So it's a good 25 miles away on the freeway system. It's kind of spread out. And so, okay, that's one thing. I got to go pick it up. The second problem I had was I didn't have a vehicle to pick it up. I didn't own a truck. I didn't know anyone. I don't know truck people in my life. I had a 1995 Dodge Neon, okay? That just shows you, what kind of a vehicle I had. But one thing I had access to at the church I was working at was an old van that no one was driving anymore. It was a 15-passenger van. You remember those vans that you would go around and pick up kids for Sunday school? Well, we had one of them just sitting in the parking lot. and it still ran. More than that, you could pull the seats out of that thing. So the back was just like an empty cab. So I asked for the measurements of the piano. I went and I measured the back of that van. Just would fit, just barely would fit. I knew I couldn't do this alone, so I grabbed one high school student to come with me. And I drove to the southern part of the city because I thought, how heavy, it's not like it's one of these pianos, how heavy could it be? And so I get down to the house, I pull up to the driveway, knock on the door, we go in, we look at it, we're excited, exchange the money, and then I remember that first moment when we go to try to start moving it, and it's kind of like, okay, it's on a carpet, we just got to bring it over a tiny little lip, so we drag it, and then I go to lift it, that first moment I go, oh no, this is much heavier than I thought it was going to be originally. And so there were some complications because there were some narrow hallways we had to maneuver around. There was another lip that you had to kind of lift it over. There were 3 steps to go down, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're trying to lift something that weighs a ton with one other person, you realize this is going to be a difficult process. So 30 minutes later, we managed to get it out of the house. Problem number 2, we get to the back of the van. And one thing I hadn't thought about was, if the base of the van is at my waist, how am I going to lift it up and get it in there? And so for the next 30 minutes, the reason I can't tell you how I did this is because it was so traumatic. I've blocked it out of my mind, but somehow we got one end of that piano up. And then we go to the other side to try to lift it up together. Problem number 3. Even though we had measured the height of the back of the van, one thing we didn't account for was a slight curvature on these vans. And so the corners of the piano wouldn't quite fit into what I originally thought it was. So we spend the next hour monkeying with this piano, and we somehow got it tilted sideways. And yes, when I got it back, I did have to tune this piano, okay? But we somehow got it sideways and into the van. I was tired, I was exhausted. All we had to do was drive back home. We're on a freeway that goes 60 miles an hour. The most I could push this van was about 40 to 45 miles an hour. People were driving by us, looking at us, because they saw the back of the van being weighed down by the amount of weight that was in this piano. But then the next problem comes, because as I glance down at the heating gauge, I start to see it climbing and climbing and climbing. And so, I'm praying as we're driving on this road that we're not going to break down, yet alone ruin the van forever. It's like one of these what have I done moments in my life. We got it back. I'm tired. I'm hurting. I'm exhausted. And that's before I even get this thing out of my vehicle. And it was one of these cases where, yes, like I said, we had to tune the piano afterwards, and we got it in there for Christmas time, but it was like I completely underestimated the amount of difficulty and weight it would be to transport something that was unnaturally meant to be fit into something like this van. This van was meant to transport people, and oh, by the way, this van had seen some miles, it had seen some life, so the very fact that I'm doing something like this caused it to get to a place where it was on the verge of being stuck or broken down, and the reason why it was so ineffective is because it was never designed to carry that in the first place. Now, I tell you this story because I just think it's an incredible metaphor for life, right? I look at people all the time, and I see individuals who are clipping at a rate, but if they're looking at the internal gauge of their life, they would see the temperature coming up. They would see that they're barely making it. They're not going the clip of the speed that they know they should be going at full tilt. And it's usually because of the same reality. The distinctives might be different, but the reality is simply this. You're carrying a weight that was not meant to be around your shoulders. You're being weighed down by realities in life, and they're difficult, they're not manageable, and so the risk and the threat that you're walking with every single day is that if you don't collapse under the weight of the strain, you might not make it to the finish line at all. And I'm guessing that there have been some of you here in this room, when you look at your last year, just the last year, you would look at and you would identify a time, a place, maybe it's multiple times and places, maybe you're going through it right now, and you would be like, yep, that was my September, that was my October, this is right now for me right now. And there's so many things that can contribute to that reality, right? Like there's just like normal like schedules of life, there's paces, there's setbacks, all normal aspects of living a life with family and jobs and complications in the city. But I'm actually not talking about those things as real as they might be. What I'm talking about are the things that go even deeper into our lives, into our heads and our hearts. The things that we carry, sometimes more than a season, they carry for like an entire lifetime. They're those like big regrets that we have on our life. If you're a Christian and you know that you've been called to live to a certain standard, you're called to live by the Spirit and live in line with Jesus Christ. One of the things that can be a weight around our shoulders, even if it's something before we even came into that relationship with Jesus Christ, is we can look and we can see that we have regrets, we have a past, we have issues, we have fears, we have perceptions, we have bitterness, things and hurts and realities that we carry and have carried for a long, long time. And if we don't deal with those realities, the weight of them will bring us to the point of eventually breaking down. One of my favorite passages in the Bible is John 10:10. John's a great book that describes the narrative and the life of Jesus Christ. And in this book, he says in John 10:10, a passage where he talks to his disciples and those who are following him, those who are curious about him. And he says this, that he has come, watch this, to give life, but not just life, life to the full. Life to the full. What does that even mean? Where we can experience his life. Where we can receive forgiveness of sins, where we can experience grace, where we can experience purpose, where we can come into a relationship with God and recognize, oh my goodness, this is what I was created for. This is what life is really all about. This is what goodness is all about. But can I be honest? You can read a passage like that and kind of laugh to yourself, because the concept of life to the full can seem so unattainable and so unrealistic when you are journeying day after day through life and you are just struggling to make it to the end because you feel so weighed down by issues in your life. We've been in the series throughout the summer. We're getting close to the end, and the series title has been called Send Me. And we've been saying this because we have believed in this season that the Lord in 2025 and 26 is preparing us for something. He is asking us to go and serve our communities. And so to be partnered with Christ in a unique way means we need to be filled with the Spirit. We need to be equipped with certain realities. We need to know what it means to be partners with Jesus Christ. But one of the things that kind of caught me as I was preparing this week's sermon is that I think the concept, even if we think conceptually, it's like, okay, I agree. I need to do this. I need to add this to my life. It's good to practice these things. If we're being really honest with ourselves, it's like the thought of adding anything when we feel so weighed down is just completely unattainable. And so what I want to kind of shift to today as part of the equipping is almost a prerequisite for that, is the things that we kind of need to drop from our lives. The weights that we carry around us, because the concept of adding anything is just simply exhausting. It's weighing us down and holding us back. And there are some people here, the problem is that the concept of having to drop something can seem even confusing because we've been carrying weights so long that we don't even know how to identify the things that are in our life that are actually the core root of our problems. And so what I want to do is really quickly, I want to look at this short passage that we looked at from Hebrews 12 today, and look at three things that I just think that every person, especially people who follow Jesus Christ, like three things that need to be dropped from your life before you can experience life to the full. Ready for this? Number one, you need to drop your past. Now, this passage starts with the word therefore. That's usually not what you start a chapter with in a book. So keep in mind, when the Bible was written, they didn't write with chapter selections. We put that in later, and we didn't always do a super great job with that. You don't usually start a chapter by saying, therefore. It's a continuation of a thought that was going on in chapter 11. So Hebrews 11 is one of the great chapters in the Bible. It's called the Hall of Faith. Hebrews chapter 11, I encourage you to read it later, but it is just this descriptor. The writer of Hebrews is trying to convey to you, the reader, what a life of faith looks like. The metaphor he gives is a race. What a great metaphor, right? Olympics are coming up this year. We've all seen different kinds of races. We know it takes real effort, real stamina. It takes real training to be able to not only work into a race, but to finish the race and finish it well. But before he even gets there, he wants to show people who've already run that race. And he calls them, therefore, we have a great cloud of witnesses. What's witnesses? Imagine a race, and they're the cheerleaders. But more than cheerleaders, they're veterans. They've been there. And they're going, keep going, keep going. So the great chapter of faith talks about all these figures from out the Old Testament, and it goes by faith. Abel offered a great sacrifice. By faith, Noah built an ark when it seemed crazy. By faith, Abraham, when he was living in a foreign land, heard God call him to go, and he obeyed. Just showing these great figures, just snapshots, right, of people to try to encourage us. Yes, these are individuals who've done the journey that I'm in right now, and I can use them as an example. Here's the crazy thing. Examine their stories. Go read them. He's only giving snapshots when he writes this in Hebrews. Go look deep into their stories. And can I tell you, almost every one of them have a checkered past. Abraham, Jacob, Samson. You would expect them to be saints. They're not. Look at people like Moses, who murdered someone in cold blood. Or Rahab, whose vocation was prostitution. Or how about David, who among his many sins, probably his most notorious one is that he had an affair with a woman who was already married, who he was friends with, the officer, and then when he could not get him drunk enough to sleep with his wife so that he could cover up her pregnancy that he brought in, has him murdered. These people today would be canceled in our culture, okay, right? Like, these are not virtuous individuals. We would categorize them as failures, and yet, in spite of that, their past is not the thing that defines them. And for some of us, we might find that disappointing. Can I tell you, as someone who is incredibly imperfect myself, I find great hope in that. Because if someone like them, with their stories and their situations, can be redeemed, and grace is big enough to cover their past and their situation and their sin, then it's big enough to cover mine. So God still uses Moses to lead a nation. Rahab, even though she was a prostitute in Jericho, will continue a family line that will literally lead to the person of Jesus. Did you know that? Or how about David, who, in spite of everything else, remains a man after God's own heart? What am I getting at? Friends, there are way too many of us here today who have a past, and you let that past define you. And let me just say this. Your past might be real. I'm not trying to dismiss that. I'm not trying to say that doesn't count. It may explain part of your story, but hear me today. In God's eyes, that no longer defines you. I don't know who needs to hear this today, but you are not a lost cause. You are not a screw-up. You are not beyond redemption. Whether it is something you've done or something that's been done to you, there is nothing, underline, nothing that can keep God's redemptive grace from reaching even you. I say hallelujah to that. That is the central message of the gospel, is that he has come specifically for you. So your past, your story, your mistakes, your situations, they can explain part of your story. That's okay, but it doesn't define your future. May I even tell you something else? Your past mistakes or situations might be redeemed when you put them into the hands of God in such a way that you're able to serve and minister to other people who will only listen to you because they're going through the thing that you've gone through. I've gone to people as a pastor and sat down with them, and I can sympathize with their cause, but I can't empathize with their cause. Why? Because I didn't live it. But I'm able to point them to other people who've walked exactly what they're going through, even if it's painful. And the cool thing is even a terrible situation that's been done to you, even a situation where you've made a mistake in life, if you've put it into the hands of God's redemptive power to give you grace and forgiveness in your life, that can actually be used to minister to other people. So let it explain, but don't let it define you. Drop your past and live in the grace of God's calling and freedom. That's just the first one. Here's the second one, is our distractions. Our distractions. So Rachel told a story about me here last week. I decided that I'm going to tell a story about her. Now, it's not nearly as fun, but I know a few weeks ago Rachel brought an illustration of something that she has just loved this past year that she bought called a rucksack. Do you guys remember that? She has this backpack that has a 30-pound weight in it. And she claims that that's good for exercise. I don't know. She just looks miserable when she's wearing it all the time. Her back hurts after a while. She wears that thing every chance she gets. In the kitchen when she's cooking, sometimes when she's just doing little menial tasks around the house, she's walking around like she's climbing Mount Everest, right? She's got this weighted backpack on. The summertime, Rachel and I, we live down by the dike, right beside the Fraser River, and one of the things we love to do, especially as the cool of the evenings, is we like to go for walks at the dike. And of course, my wife, if we're going for a walk, she's going to bring her weighted backpack with her. Now, the reason why I like this thing is because if you know my wife, Rachel Wilson does everything with purpose. So we don't go for strolls along the dike. She's walking the dike, and I'm more of like, let's just enjoy the day. So this weight actually slows her down at my pace. So it's actually a good thing for both of us. But here's one of the things about Rachel is I'll notice this about 20, 25, 30 minutes into our walk, is that I can just see it on her face. She won't say it because she's not complaining, but I know my wife, and I can tell when the weight is getting to her. I can tell when it's starting to hurt her back. A good husband would probably take that pack from her. Just leave that there. But one of the things that frustrates my wife is even though we're going for a nice stroll, my wife doesn't do anything without a purpose or a goal. When we go for a walk, her goal is, I'm going to get to this destination. I'm going to do it at this clip, at this time. And if the thing she's carrying around her back causes her to slow down or not finish the goal, it will drive her nuts internally for the day. And so one of the things that I think the second thing we need to drop from our life is kind of like this. We call it a distraction. The Bible calls it those things that hinder us. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Well, the hinder part, I want you to hear me, is not necessarily a sin. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just might be something that is unbalanced in your life. It's something that causes negative effects because we've allowed that unbalance to strain us backwards. And I call it kind of like our spiritual midlife crisis. Spiritual midlife crisis. Well, I'm 43. I'm starting to look at my life right now. And one of the things you do at this kind of tough phase of life is you start to see like, well, this is where I imagined in my 20s I would be. And this is what I've done and accomplished so far. And usually there's a gap between those two realities, and it can kind of disappoint and spin us out. And usually, if I'm being really honest with myself, the reason why I have not become the kind of person I imagined I would be back in my earlier years is because, well, frankly, I've had things that I've pursued and activities I've engaged in, and I'm not even talking about bad things here, but unbalanced. I've pursued so much of them that what has happened is there's been a gap. And can I just argue for many of us in our spiritual lives, when we started walking with Jesus, we usually entered in with this great love affair. We usually were like, wow, this is incredible. This walk is so beautiful. And we had this picture of what it would look like down the road. But you know how life is. Interruptions come along. We kind of get used to things. We take grace for granted. And then we get to a point in our life when we finally assess our spiritual walk. And we're like, I'm not the person I thought I'd be at this point. I'm not where I thought I would be. And may I argue, the bigger the gap is usually the more there are distractions in our life. So if you imagine running a marathon, you don't take extras. You strip down to the vital necessities so that you are free to be able to journey all the way. What are the distractions in your life? And I want to say this again, friends. These are not necessarily bad or wrong things. These are not categorized as sins. But if they are unbalanced and consuming your life, you might get further down the road, look backwards and go, how on earth did I get to such a different place than I imagined I would be? Is it entertainment? Listen, entertainment, when have we had more access to entertainment than ever today? I don't know about you. Have you ever gotten like in front of a screen and a weekend's gone by and you've looked backwards and you're like, my head hurts. What have I done with myself? Is it relationships? Is it your career? All of these, listen, they're all important. They all have places in our life. But if they're unbalanced, they will be the things that actually hinder you in your race of faith. And it's why, friends, listen, this is not a season. You're going to see us double down on this over and over again. The reason we are so big on prayer meetings, on worship nights, on small groups, gathering together, the reason is because we're just trying to draw balance back to your life. Life is already busy. There's so many distractions. There's so many things that if we allow them unbalanced can hinder our race. And all we're trying to do is hook you back and just say, friends, come back. Spend an hour in prayer. Oh, I'm so busy. Trust me, you're too busy not to pray. Let yourself be recalibrated with the Lord so that you can experience life to the full. You need to drop the second thing, your distractions, but the third one is our appetites. So if the first thing is the thing that hinders us, the second thing is those things the Bible calls the things that entangle us in your life. There's this strategy that happened during the medieval times, especially in warfare, where there would be these mini kingdoms that were kind of popping up all over Europe. And this strategies also existed in parts of Asia as well. But, after the Roman Empire kind of collapsed, there was this period of instability. There'd be all these kingdoms. Some would be more strong than others. And so it was just a time of constant warfare as everyone was jockeying for positions. There's this wonderful strategy I had heard about in central France where what would happen is as a larger army was coming in to try to invade the kingdom, the army knew that they didn't have the resources to be able to compete against their greater numbers, especially their cavalry. So one of the strategies that one of the warriors did is he kind of figured out, he put his army actually down on the bottom of a hill instead of the top of a hill, which didn't seem to make sense. And so when the army would be coming downward, kind of at a full gallop, their horses would be racing down. It would look like they were easy pickings. They were trying to draw them in for a trap, and the trap was simply this. They would hide these long ropes or chains in tall grass at the base of the mountains so that as the army was just about on top of them at the very last second, you would get some of the strongest warriors on each side pull this rope or this chain tight. Now, you couldn't hold that chain or that rope tight very long, but the purpose was not so that it would be this straight line the whole way through. It was just enough so that as the men were running down the field, they would get that rope or chain tangled around their feet so that they would fall down and collapse. And when they would fall down and collapse, they were easy pickings for the army that was just waiting there to pick them off. And here's the point, friends. Is yes, there are things in our past that we need to drop. And yes, there are some distractions in our life that we need better balance to in our life. We all know these things. But one of these things we got to bring up all the time, and it's so uncomfortable, but it's so real, is there's also things that entangle our lives. And the things that entangle our lives are those sins that are left unaddressed that over time can destroy us. I work in the church world, and one of the hardest things about working in the church world is, there's 2.5 billion Christians in the world, so every now and then you're going to read about some yahoos. But I feel like every month I'm reading about another prominent pastor or another prominent church leader who has been engaging in some kind of secret appetite. Usually it's a sexual sin or something like that. And usually it's been going on for months, if not years and years. And the Bible is very clear about this. It says it over and over again. Your sins eventually will find you out. And it's so hard to see. It's painful to watch. These are some of the greatest figures that we've read about and seen about. And it's like the higher they climb, the harder they fall. But it doesn't just have to be in the church world, right? We see this in the world of entertainment. We see this in the world of politics, of business. Maybe they're people you don't even know, but just in your world, you've just seen these people who've had this secret thing in their life, in their background, that they've never addressed, an appetite that they fed, and left unaddressed. Friends, some of us need to hear this today. Left unaddressed can and will eventually destroy us. And so one of the things Jesus invites us to in this passage is to actually, as difficult as it is for some of us, don't try to hide those things. Don't try to bury them. Don't sweep them on the carpet. Put them right in front of you. Recognize them for what they are, but also recognize that God's grace is big enough even for that. But you've got to drop it. Got to drop it. You can't play around with fire because eventually you will get burnt. I guess the question to kind of close off this message is, it's great to know these things. You know, it's one thing to identify issues in our lives, weights around our neck that aren't supposed to be there, that really need to be dropped. But so what? Like, where do we go from here? Like, there's got to be a connector that helps us accomplish this thing. You ready for this? It's so basic, but it's something we need reminders of constantly. It's found in verse 2. It says this: let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. You ready for this? Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. See it? You got that weight around your shoulder? Got that past that haunts you? Got that distraction that consumes you, that appetite that you know is leading you down a path? How do I do it? How do I drop it? It's great, I see it. How do I drop it? Put your eyes on Jesus. Jesus is the one who liberates in the first place. And maybe you've walked and you've taken this grace for granted for a long time. His call to you today is, look at me. Don't look at the world. Don't look at your appetites. Don't focus on your path. Look at me. Every day when you wake up, me. Look at me. Focus on me. Read my word. Spend time with me in prayer. Look at me. Focus your attention. You know, I never, stated that I was any kind of person who ran races, but one of the things I do remember when I was running races was one of the things we did when we did long distance in college was, as our person was training us for long distance races, is that you always had to have your focus on the end point, right? You always had to know where the end race was. And even today, you see these people who do marathons. I've always wondered, like what does a coach do in a for a marathon racer? It's like, hey, keep running, run faster. Like, what do they do? But one of the things they're doing is constantly reminding them that's the finish line. Keep your eyes focused right there. Don't look to your left. Don't look to your right. And it sounds so basic, but over 26.2 miles, you're running and you're going to get tired. You're going to get distracted. You're going to start putting your eyes to the right. You're going to start putting your eyes to the left. And what's going to happen is just little by little, you're going to start straying a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, making your race more long, more difficult. And the invitation here at the end of Hebrews is it's like a marathon runner, but someone who's coaching them and training them to say, keep your eyes laser focused on Jesus. He's the pioneer of our faith. That means he authored it. He began it. But he's also the perfecter of our faith. And so wherever you are in your journey right now, he's inviting you to keep your eyes laser focused on him. Don't worry about tomorrow and don't worry about yesterday. Just wake up every day and keep your eyes laser focused on him, so that at the end of it, this great cloud of witnesses who is cheering you on as you read their stories can see you all the way to the finish line. One day where you can hear those wonderful words, well done, good and faithful servant.